Actually, I think, uh-oh, there you go. Here I am. Did I start stream? Hey everybody, we're live. This is Nate Norfolk from Ray's Wine and Spirits. I am the wine and spirits director here, and we're lucky enough today to have Theresa Heredia with us. She is the winemaker at Gary Farrell Winery in the Russian River Valley in Sonoma County, and she'll be sharing the Russian River Valley Selection Chardonnay with us and the Russian River Valley Pinot Noir. I'll just ask once and make sure, the audio and video is looking good out there with everybody, and that I see some of you are waiting. And Chris Condos, I realized I didn't respond to your email last week. I see that you're on here. Sorry, dude. If somebody can give me a heads up that everything's sounding good, we're about to go live, and I'll, have Theresa start. Yep, I'll have Theresa just, get into it, and I'll have her introduce herself at this. Oh, wait, I know what we said. One thing, Theresa, before I start. Yeah, so everyone out there, thanks. Everybody's saying it sounds great and looks good. I have the wines on sale today, and the Chardonnay, they're both on our website. The Chardonnay will be $29.99, and the Pinot Noir will be $36.99. These are like the lowest prices I think you're going to find on these two iconic Russian River Valley wines. The way I have this all staged is you'll be able to pick the wines up anytime, like after Wednesday afternoon or later, anytime after this following Wednesday afternoon. That allows me to, like, no matter how much we sell, I'll have it all here and ready. And I'll remind everybody once again at the end, they're available via Ray's website. I'll put a link in the live chat too with that, and I'll talk to you guys at the end too. I hope you love everything. Feel free to chat and ask me questions via the live chat text. And Theresa and I will just have a conversation between us, and I'll review the PowerPoint with everybody and ask questions as we go along. And then I'll have a question and answer section at the end. Theresa's agreed to that. She'll probably be exhausted. Yeah. Hopefully, people ask a lot of really good questions in this, so hold me to the fire, guys. I'll remind everybody I have 2 new events up for May. There's a board. We're gonna do like a value and variety Bordeaux virtual tasting on May 8th, 2 weeks from now, and then at the end of May on the 22nd, I'm gonna do kind of a rosé style guide tasting too. And myself, I'll host those alone. I won't have any esteemed winemakers with me then. So Theresa, take it from there.
Excellent. Thanks, everybody. Well, first of all, thanks to Ray's Wines for inviting me to present our Gary Farrell wines. It's cool. I've never been there, but when I go, it's going to be the first place I go. So Gary Farrell Winery is it's a big name. It's a huge part of pioneering in the wine industry in Sonoma County, California. So we're here in Northern California, about an hour and a half north of San Francisco in the Russian River Valley. And Gary Farrell Winery, I joined in 2012. Prior to that, I was making wines for 10 years at Joseph Phelps Vineyards out on their very far west Sonoma Coast Freestone Vineyard. So I really, that's where I went to University of Pinot Noir and Chardonnay. And before that, I studied biochemistry as an undergraduate student, chemistry as a graduate student at UC Davis, and that's when I discovered the wine program. Believe it or not, I was a teaching assistant while I was in the PhD program in chemistry at Davis. And there were 400 undergraduate students in the chemistry classes, general chem. So it took 12 graduate students to break that apart into lab sessions. And so there were 12 graduate students. We all had to get together to grade exams. And when we did, there were grad students from different departments. So I met these two from the viticulture and enology program. And they started talking about their research, and I started talking about my research. And when they started talking about wine chemistry, I was floored because I had already done all the chemistry coursework. And within a few days, I transferred into the wine program, the enology program. And that's how I landed in this career. Spent the 10 years working at Joseph Phelps, did a harvest in Burgundy in 2006. And that really just helped shaped who I am as a winemaker, my winemaking philosophy, in terms of picking, at lower sugars and trying to capture a sense of place and working with the best vineyards available, which perfectly matched with everything when I came to Gary Farrell, because we work with about 36 different iconic vineyards all over the Russian River Valley. So Gary Farrell, the man, is a pioneer of the Russian River Valley. He's synonymous with the appellation. When it first began in 1983, he had only just produced his first wine from the 1982 vintage. He was the first winemaker for Rocchioli, actually. They were working at Davis Bynum. It was kind of a collegiate facility, a lot of winemakers. So Rocchioli was there, Gary Farrell was there, Davis Bynum, obviously, Joseph Swan, they all knew each other. So the Rocchioli family asked Gary to make the wine for Rocchioli, and so he was their first winemaker. And that first year was 1982, and they paid him in Rocchioli grapes. So he made his first wine under the Gary Farrell label from the 82 vintage and released it in 85. So the name's been around for even longer than that, but the winery was built in 2000. Gary officially sold in 2004, retired in 2006, passed the baton to his assistant winemaker. She stayed on until 2011, just before I came on. So it's a pretty great story. A lot of rich history.
Wow. All right. Well, so do you think I think we kind of touched on base why, you're a Russian River Valley pioneer in the broader sense of the term. Yeah. Yeah, you got that. So you want to kind of move into a little bit of like just to give some people ideas of like what's special about the Russian River Valley in particular for Pinot Noir and Chardonnay production?
What's special about it? Yeah. Well, what really makes Gary Farrell Winery and the Russian River Valley special, first of all, Gary Farrell, what makes us unique and special is that we have access to, as I said, 36 different iconic vineyards from around Sonoma County predominantly. We get a few small handful of vineyards from outside of Sonoma County, but most of our stuff is here in Sonoma County, predominantly Russian River Valley. What makes the region special, if you look at the map that shows the Sonoma County AVAs, is that each of these different regions has a different microclimate. And including, in addition to that, Sonoma County has more soil types than all of France. So it's crazy to put that in perspective.
Wow, I never knew that when you say it like that. Wow. Due to both there being volcanic things, alluvial, and just the mountain ranges themselves and low sand, the whole 9 yards.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
I mean, it has to do, I'm not going to get into this amount of detail because I'm not educated in it all, but just the movement of the tectonic plates cause and then changing soil over time. So for example, in Green Valley, you have this really fine, powdery, silty, sandy loam. And you can see Green Valley is right here, this little heart-shaped region within the larger heart called the Russian River Valley. And that area is very cold. It's close to the Pacific Ocean. So it's foggy. The soil is sandy, which is, synonymous with a coastal region. Whereas if you go a little bit more inland and north toward where Gary Farrell Winery is and where Rocchioli is located, so, moving just up north toward the town of Healdsburg, you have the vineyards that run along the river, which you can sort of see it snaking through the region. And those soil types are more alluvial, riverbed, gravelly loam. So different growing conditions. It's warmer up north, so the fruit characteristics in the wines is more red, more succulent, juicy, a little bit riper, not quite as acid driven. The wines from Green Valley are deeper, darker, earthier, and they have a different acid component, a different acid presence to them. So think about 36 different vineyards. And, even different blocks within vineyards from the region. So that's really what makes Sonoma County special, and the Russian River in particular, and Gary Farrell, because we have access to so many iconic vineyards like Rocchioli and Hallberg, Martinelli, Pellegrini. I could go on and on.
Yeah,
all the eyes, all the Italian immigrant families.
Yeah, that in and of itself is like, it's impossible not to talk about the history of Sonoma and how it was, how Italian immigrants really were the people to plant so many of these like iconic vineyards there, especially in the Russian River Valley too. It's really amazing. Do you want me to stay on the map, or should I?
No, you can
Okay.
go. Yeah. Go next. So I love the cool climate photo because it really shows this is what the morning looks like as you're driving over the Wohler Bridge, which is a tiny little metal, rusty, reddish orange bridge. And that's what it looks like every morning when I'm driving to the winery. And that is truly what makes this region special. So any Russian River Valley map that we look at, so the one that I just showed you of the different Sonoma County locations, the areas within Sonoma County. And then when we get to the Russian River Valley map that shows our different vineyards, you can see that the Russian River snakes from the Pacific Ocean in Jenner right through the vineyards of the Russian River Valley. And that's the most important key feature of the Russian River Valley that makes our wine so special. And it's what makes it possible to grow really amazing site-specific Pinot Noir and Chardonnay, because it's cool here. Even though it gets warm during the day, like I said, in the northern part of the Russian River Valley, so the northern part of the Russian River Valley actually butts up against Dry Creek, which is where Zinfandel is really known to come from here in Sonoma County. We grow it here in the Russian River as well in the warmer climates, but you can imagine that northern flank of the Russian River Valley being warm during the day, so you get that richness. It's like the best of both worlds, because you get all of the beautiful California typicity that people are looking for in either a Chardonnay or a Pinot, but you get that really defining acid backbone to the wines. And it's not from the warmer areas like where Rocchioli and Bacigalupi are located in the north. You get the succulent fruit and you get some acidity, some bright acidity, but it's not so acid driven for people who don't like acidic wines. It's just perfect. It's perfection. And the Russian River Selection wines that we're tasting today have little snippets, little pieces from each of those different regions. So it's pretty cool. It's a fun project to make wines.
And for folks out there, because we're Wisconsinites and we're like, we're a thirsty group, Theresa. So everybody, please, just like,
good.
I know Chris Condos out there. Chris, dude, thank you for dipping in. Like Lori, his wife, is like, who normally doesn't like Chardonnay, it says the wine's totally beautiful. She like loves it.
Yay.
So that's like, totally. And it's kind of one of the reasons, like I really wanted to showcase the opportunity came up to showcase the Gary Farrell wines. I'm like, man, this is like, in my mind, these are the Chardonnay and Pinot Noir here are really indicative of what like a great Russian River Valley Chardonnay and Pinot Noir are. So kudos to you. Theresa's been there since 2012. I think she mentioned that. We'll get to the all about her part too.
Right.
I think, in Elise, anybody else want to do you want Theresa to elaborate a little bit more on kind of the cool climate nature of the Russian River Valley? I'll let everybody think about that for just a second. I know I think it's really interesting to me when we think about you were also with, you did the Freestone project, which is more Sonoma coast. Am I correct? Or is it still right? Yeah. Russian River Valley. And do you feel wow. And I'm trying to ask this in a way do you feel to me, what's interesting about Sonoma coast is a really, really big appellation. And then we just take something like the Russian River Valley. At the same time, the Russian River Valley still has all this breadth and depth and variation in terroir And do you see there to be a contrast between the two that you as a winemaker can say to consumers kind of in a broad brush way to talk about the difference between Sonoma Coast versus Russian River Valley?
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. So, actually, when we get soon, I'll get into even more detail. When
Okay.
we get to the map that shows where our vineyards are located, I'll talk
Yep.
about the neighborhoods of the Russian River Valley,
Yep.
and then compare and contrast some of them with kind of coastal vineyards, more coastal vineyards like Freestone. We make a wine from Fort Ross, which is the closest vineyard to the Pacific Ocean in California. So, talk about true coastal wine. The wines that come from a cooler climate like that are just drenched in fog all the time.
Yep.
Vineyards are, some of them are at much higher elevations than we have here in the Russian River Valley. So you're kind of outside of the valley heat and up above, in some cases, up above the fog layer.
Mm-hmm.
So you develop a deeper, richer, denser, earthier wine that's more acid focused than, say, the more supple, juicy, succulent cherry that you get from the Russian River Valley.
Yeah.
It's making me very thirsty.
Yeah, for sure. And folks out there, and I mean, I don't want to deviate too much from this, but like, we're really like, when I thought I was really glad when the Fort Ross Seaview AVA was created, because the wines from that area are so drastically different from other things in the Sonoma Coast for that very same reason,
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, very cool. Thank you, Theresa. Yeah.
Of course.
And I'll go to, I bumped back to the map. So now I'm going to go back to, this is kind of the idea that you have unparalleled access to the idea that you're not a single, well, you guys make some single vineyard wines, and like, frankly, folks, I don't get enough of those to really offer them to a super broad group. It sounds weird.
Yeah.
You make some really tiny production things,
We
but
do.
yeah.
And we only put 2 of them into wholesale distribution.
Yeah, exactly. So I really like, I'll let there be the pitch. Like, if you guys go out to the Russian River Valley, visit these folks, because there's some really cool things that are going to be winery only and through the club.
Yeah.
So this really gives you a small insight into some of the more deep dives that they're able to do. And on that note, like here, we say you have unparalleled access. And
right.
Yeah.
So while I'm talking about unparalleled access and 2 of our most important growers who you see in this slide here, I'm going to just tell you a secret. Our Russian River Selection wines that we produce, the secret to those wines is that we make them first. So when we're picking out vineyards and picking out the wines, when it comes time to make blends, which we're doing right now, we're working on the current blends that we have in barrel. We spend about 3 weeks working on each of the 2 Russian River Selection wines, tasting through all the vineyards and the components of each, and setting aside the wines that are truly complementary to the style of Russian River Selection that we're producing. We try to keep it relatively consistent, but vintage and vineyard are more important to me than making something that tastes exactly the same from one year to the next, right? I want to capture vintage and site specificity, most importantly. So when you think about the fact that in these blends you have Rocchioli, Bacigalupi, Martinelli, even a little bit of Durell from outside Russian River, Pellegrini, you have the killer vineyards that we get fruit from, and we pay top dollar for each of these vineyards. When you think about the fact that there are maybe, between 15 and 18 different vineyards in the Russian River Selection, and 20 to 25 different vineyards in the Russian River Selection Pinot, people don't realize that they're getting the best of the best in this blend. We do that because these are the 2 wines that get into the hands of more people around the United States. So it's most important for us to make the best wine and put our best foot forward with these larger blends, the 2 of them. So now that we're talking about the icons of the Russian River Valley, we have Mr. Joe Rocchioli Jr. here on the left, and look at his face. He's such a sweetheart. And then we have Kirk Laka here, who is the general manager and vineyard manager for our Emeritus Hallberg Vineyard. So when I first started working at Gary Farrell and I met these 2 men, they were just so funny because I'm 5'3". I'm this tiny little, to them, I'm this tiny little young whippersnapper who, they would assume doesn't really know what she's doing, right? And so I come in and, the first time I met Kirk Laka was with Nancy Bailey, our general manager, and she took me around to introduce me to all of our growers. And when I met him, he's about 6'2", and he has a large stature. You can see in the picture, his hands are about as big as my head. And he stood over Nancy and looked at her, not me. And he says, she's not going to tell me how to grow my grapes, is she? So, he turns out to be just the biggest teddy bear in the whole wide world. We adore each other. In fact, your customers here, those of you who are on this call, you should check out our YouTube site, the Gary Farrell Winery Vineyards, on our YouTube channel, and watch some of the videos. You'll see what sweethearts these people are. We have a Hallberg video and many others. You can just scroll through and watch these fun videos.
Wow, he has a total good old boy vibe from one picture.
Yes. And Joe Ravioli is the man. He has been growing. Wow. He and his family have been growing grapes in the Russian River Valley since the 60s. Yeah. Right before that.
Yeah, way before that. We actually carry, guys, we have some of the Rocchioli wines here too. Yeah, typically. And they can be kind of tough to get your hands on sometimes too. Wow. Yeah.
That's why you should try some of our Gary Farrell Rocchioli when you come out to visit Gary Farrell. Any of you, check it out.
So and Kathy, you asked about going to the map. This is a more detailed Russian River Valley map that I'm on now. And, this is kind of how they're expanding their roots in the Russian River Valley and beyond, because they do, as Theresa will elaborate, there's a variety of vineyards outside of and in Santa Barbara now too. There's things that you guys are working with too.
Yeah. Santa Rita Hills near the Santa Barbara area. So this is a fantastic map. In fact, we have another one that shows the neighborhoods of the Russian River Valley, but I'm just going to kind of explain to you the areas that I'm talking about. So when we talk about all these different regions and of the Russian River Valley alone and how they compare to the Sonoma coast, it's really cool to look at the different divisions. So I was talking about the northern Russian River Valley, where Rocchioli, you can see on the map where Rocchioli and Bacigalupi are located. You can see the blue line, that's the Russian River snaking through from the Pacific Ocean around Jenner all the way through the Russian River Valley. And that's the area that's just south of Dry Creek Valley. So you can tell there that that's the warmest part. That's where you get that rich red fruit, the succulent cherry. It's just delicious. It's the wines from that region are so supple and just user friendly. They're beautiful. And then as you go out west to Green Valley, which is actually the only official neighborhood that's a sub-AVA of the Russian River Valley. The rest of them are neighborhoods that we just talk about for education purposes. So in Green Valley, you can see it's out west, it's closer to the Pacific Ocean. So the characteristics of the Hallberg vineyard are going to be more comparable to a Sonoma Coast wine. Something that comes from, say, the true West Sonoma Coast, like Freestone or Fort Ross or Hirsch. Those are just names that are, or Littori. Those are names that are synonymous with the true West Sonoma Coast. And then down in the southern tip of the Russian River Valley, this little area at the bottom of the map that's still within the borders, that's a neighborhood that's called the Sebastopol Hills. And you can sort of see that it's right next to the Petaluma Wind Gap, but also very, very influenced by the Pacific Ocean and the fog. The marine layer is constantly drenching these vineyards in fog, but the Petaluma Wind Gap is extremely windy. So this is a really cool climate. Talk about synonymous with Sonoma Coast. We could call them Sonoma Coast wines and it would be perfectly acceptable, but we're from the Russian River Valley, so we call most of our wines Russian River Valley if they fall in the borders. And then in the center, right in the heart of the map, you have the neighborhood that's called the Santa Rosa Plains. And that's called the Plains because it's a flat area. It gets warm during the day because you're in the heart of the Russian River Valley, not as warm as Rocchioli and Bacigalupi up north by about 10 minutes, by the way. So talk about the microclimates, right? They're not very far from one another, but here in the center, it's warm during the day. So you get this dense, opulent kind of plum cherry, a little bit more like black cherry flavors. So really dense, concentrated wines with great structure, but really bright acidity because the flat area, cold air settles at night, and the vines have the opportunity to really just retain ample natural acidity. So it's really cool. It's really fun to work with so many different regions after coming from 10 years of making wines from just one vineyard, 100 acres.
Wow. Very cool. Wow. And like a lot of folks realize, and Theresa touched on this before, we sell a ton of different, Zinfandel from the Russian River Valley, and it's, drastically different. When we talk about certain people being pioneers with Pinot Noir, like 100 years ago, there wasn't Pinot Noir. Russian River Valley is now synonymous with Pinot Noir.
Correct.
Over the last like 30 plus years. And, once again, I'm just sorry to rehash this over and over again, okay. But you guys were really at the forefront of that happening, where even 40, 50 years ago, this would have been a region much more synonymous with Zinfandel than it was Pinot Noir. Yeah.
100%. Yep. And actually, thank you for saying that, because when I was talking about Joe Rocchioli, I intended to talk about how he was involved, Joe Rocchioli Jr., how he was involved in pioneering Pinot Noir in California.
They thought he was crazy. They thought he was crazy for a while.
They thought he was crazy.
Yeah.
His dad thought he was crazy.
Yeah.
So they were growing grapes for decades, right? They were growing grapes and shipping them off to the central California to go into jug wine, Hardy Burgundy and whatnot. They were growing varietals like French Colombard, big yielding, high production grapes that yield a lot of juice, a lot of liquid. And so, they're perfect for those inexpensive blenders. And so his dad, Joe Rocchioli Sr., just, he was like, we're doing fine. We're able to earn a living by selling these grapes to these people in the central California. And, we don't need to be fancy. We don't need to grow specific varietals. Nobody was talking about clones back then, let alone varietals.
Yeah.
So shortly after Joe Rocchioli Sr. passed away, Joe Rocchioli Jr. basically, not exactly, but basically went out on with the backhoe and just started ripping out all these old vines and planting Pinot Noir. And he thought, if they can do it in France, we have a really special climate here. We can do this in California. So that was his belief. And boy, was he right. Because look, the Rocchioli name is, one of the most famous names in California winemaking.
Yeah, it's always astounding to me that and this is something that we hear in California, but I think is really like Sonoma has such variety and like a broad like cornucopia of what can be grown there in a way that I think is somewhat unparalleled in California in such a compact area. I mean, you could argue this about like Santa Barbara or Mendocino or something too, but really Sonoma as a place that had this like had a wine industry and then had the ability to have a diversified rebirth of its wine industry that's unparalleled. You could say that about Napa, but not this. Napa doesn't have, to me, the breadth, depth, and variety that Sonoma does.
I 100% agree with you, and I didn't know that until I moved to Sonoma County. I knew that there was greater variety out here, but when I moved here, I thought I was moving to the sticks. I was living in Napa, working at Joseph Phelps, and so when I moved here, I realized, wow, there's just you have direct access to the coast, about 20-25 minutes driving away. You have the eastern mountains where you can do hiking and mountain biking if you want. You can go surf at the coast. And then think about that variety. We have a greater variety of, different types of ethnic cuisine, a different variety of types of wine to drink. You can get Cabernet from Sonoma County too. It's just going to be a different style. Gary used to make some beautiful Cab Merlot blends.
Wow.
Yeah. And Zinfandel is fantastic from the Russian River Valley.
So,
moving on.
Dedication to world-class quality.
Yes. So we have been making wines since 1982. I was telling you that Gary's first wine was in 82 and that he sold the wine. Well, he built the current Gary Farrell facility in 2000, but he sold it in 2004 and he stayed on through the end of the 2005 vintage. and he officially retired in 2006. And we were purchased by a really small, high quality oriented group of investors. The biggest investor is Bill Price, and he is a managing partner of Kistler. He owns his own brand called Three Sticks. That name comes from the fact that he grew up in Hawaii, and he is William Price III. So he was a surfer. He was a surfer, and his friends used to call him Billy Three Sticks. So that's his own label, obviously with his own name. He also owns Durrell and Gaps Crown, two vineyards from which we purchase fruit and make amazing vineyard designates out of. So a little bit of each of those two vineyards goes into the wines as well. These guys, and there's a woman as well who's an investment partner. These people are really dedicated to top quality wineries, small but top quality wineries, and they are dedicated to putting the money into the facility, to the people who are working at the winery, so that we can really just elevate the quality of Gary Farrell and these other brands that they're involved with. So we're really fortunate to be, I feel very fortunate to be working with them. They really truly care about what we're doing from day to day, and not in a controlling way. They let us do it. They help us, they support us. It's fantastic.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, I used to be part of the Kistler Wine Club, and they got a lot of my money. Yeah.
Well, thanks then. That means that you helped invest in Gary
I helped
Farrell.
eventually for that. I gave Bill some money to eventually buy you guys. There you go.
Right on.
Yeah, right. Yeah. And if anybody's interested too, we sell a variety. We have a variety of the Kistler vineyards on different occasions. Kistler wines on different occasions. I get some Gaps Crown Vineyard designate Pinot Noir from a few different producers. But once again, to kind of note value with what you guys are doing, like the wines we're tasting today are a third the price of what, about half of what a lot of Kistler wines are, and a third the price of anything I'm getting from Gaps Crown nowadays. So once again, this is so.
So think about that, Nate. Think about the fact that there's a little bit of that Gaps Crown going into our Russian River Selection blend, and that's just crazy.
Yeah, like Costa Brown releases a Gaps Crown Pinot Noir, and it's going to be $150 retail nowadays. Do you feel like that kind of touches on some of the quality aspects of the wines, especially or do you want to further kind of elaborate on that? I mean,
no, I think that's great.
Okay.
And, I just want to, as we move to the next slide that talks about, I love it when there's a photo of myself when I'm on a Zoom. It's great.
It's kind of, it's pretty, we made it meta, so.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Anyway, so I already talked about my experience and how that helped to my time at Phelps Freestone, 10 years working with that 100 acres of far west Sonoma Coast Pinot Noir and Chardonnay. It shaped who I am as a winemaker, but really what solidified it is my experience in 2006 working at Domaine de Monti in Burgundy.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Tradition.
Yeah.
Have you ever seen Mondovino?
Yeah, he's Hubert de Montely. He died.
Yes.
He passed away a few. Oddly, my friend Doug Weber worked there, did harvest there 1 year also. Okay. Probably not much after you were there. Wow, this is wild. Small world.
A year or two.
Yeah.
Was Hubert? Were Hubert and Madame de Monti alive?
Yeah, absolutely. They were alive. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. I think she passed first. Maybe shortly after, maybe 07, 08, something like that. And he passed after that.
Here, I'll put the name of this. The movie came out in probably 04, 05, and it's called Mondovino.
Mondovino.
And it's and
it's
go
a documentary.
Ahead. Yeah.
That's okay. It's a documentary, and it's really fantastic because if you like to geek out on wine history, there are two main characters in the movie. You have Michel Rolland, who's talking about Bordeaux and I think the Napa Valley and technological enhancements in winemaking and what makes wines, special and unique because of technology. And then you have, I'm doing the hands because this is Hubert de Monti. He talks about tradition, and he's downstairs from the apartment above the old cellar in Volnay, where I lived in this apartment above the old cellar.
Oh, wow.
And he's standing right downstairs next to this old chair that was still sitting there when I worked there. So it was really cool that this movie was made before I went there, and then I saw the chair, and I lived in the apartment up there. So it was really cool. But yeah, Hubert de Monti, his brand was always about tradition. Work with the best vineyards, pick early. Acid was a key feature of their wines because they want the wines to age for decades, not years, but decades. In fact, when they produce their wine and put it into bottle, they don't think you should open it for at least a decade.
He's one of the reasons Robert Parker basically,
yes,
in so many words, got kicked out of Burgundy. Like
yes,
the famed wine critic.
I forgot that.
Yeah. So Hubert de Monti, people were just, Robert Parker, the famed wine critic, really was giving a variety of Burgundy producers grief, and they basically, it's okay, I swear on this thing all the time. They basically, they were basically like, "Fuck you, Robert Parker." They're like, "This is how our family's been making wine for hundreds of years. Get lost." Yeah. They were just like, "Shut up, man!" Like everybody, if you like, if you want to just review 200% new oak red wines that are 16% alcohol, go ahead, do that. We don't need you. Was right. Basically what it is, and it's the film's really fascinating. I had no idea until that's where you were. Wow, that's so cool. Yeah. I think somebody told me years later that so there's a famous restaurant in the town of Beaune in Burgundy, in the heart of Burgundy. It's called Ma Cuisine. I think it's still there, and it's where all the who's who of the wine industry in Burgundy go to. And so I think Robert Parker went there when he was visiting, and Hubert de Monti was dining, and I think they had an interaction. That's what somebody told me. Yes.
The lore of Robert Parker and Burgundy. I love it.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. Oh man, sorry. It's kind of a drift, but also probably really helped inform you of kind of the next two stages in what you were doing. Yeah. Wow. Really, really cool. So I don't know what else you want to kind of like. I'm
going to jump into Chardonnay.
Yeah, for sure. We're going to talk about, let's do that.
Because quite honestly, that's one of the most important things that I learned while I was there is, I'm going to be real here and tell everybody here that prior to my first encounter with drinking Burgundy, which was just a couple years before I went to Burgundy. Maybe it was about 5 years before I went to Burgundy. I hated California Chardonnay.
Oh man, lots of people say this. This is so cool, and it's one of the reasons like I was like, "Oh, this is exciting to have somebody that has this great approach to and access to all these different vineyards." And a lot of people say this. It's a joke that we make in the store all the time, and it's and I go like sometimes I'll draw a Venn diagram, a Chardonnay, and it'll be like 3 bubbles. And I'll be like, well, there's a lot of different ways you can do this. And it's very, my hardest thing as a consumer, and even you and I are consumers, Theresa, it's a goddamn minefield. That's the hardest part about it. So I'll give you, sorry, it's like I'm mansplaining here. I ultimately apologize. No. But yeah, you go, you elaborate on this. 'Cause
I like your interjections. I like it. It makes it more fun. Rather than me just doing all the talking. So when I worked in Burgundy, I had access to wines that I couldn't previously afford, right? So I was there for 2 months, living and working there, living and breathing cheese and French cuisine and French wines, Burgundian wines. And so I realized that while you're there, you can pick up a really fantastic, Premier Cru Burgundy, sometimes even Grand Cru for, less than 30 euros. So I did. We drank a lot of grape. That?
It's the truth. Yeah, it's like
it was true back then. I don't know if it's true today, because yields have been so low the past few years. But anyway, back to the point. So I hated California Chardonnay. Just had a newfound love of the varietal. And when I say love, I mean like I fell hard for Chardonnay. I realized how special it is and how transparent it is in terms of expressing its place, right? You have Pouligny-Montrachet that's probably more comparable to the richness and concentration that you would get from a California Chardonnay. The wines can be a little bit riper. They have a greater impression of oak. But then you have, you know, the different areas of like different cooler parts of Burgundy where the Chardonnays are more mineral driven. And I thought to myself, why do all the California Chardonnays taste the same? You know, and so I came home with a new passion to produce Chardonnays and Pinots, but I felt that we were already doing that successfully. I learned how to do it better, but I came home with a newfound love and passion for producing Chardonnays that have site specificity, right? And so perfect transition to the Gary Farrell winemaking. I found that it's really important to not only pick early on the lower end of the ripeness spectrum to capture freshness, vibrant aromatics, really juicy, site-specific flavors. So for example, in the Santa Rosa Plains, right in the center, that flat area, you're going to get more citrus, more mineral characteristics. From the northern part, that warmer part of the Russian River Valley, Rocchioli, for example, you're going to get more succulent, ripe, some tropical characteristics, but maybe like a roasted Meyer lemon instead of a fresh yellow lemon that you'd get from the Santa Rosa Plains. And so I learned how to pick specifically, you know, based on the qualities, the temperatures, the soil type, the qualities of the fruit at the time of harvest. I learned how to pick based on the flavor profile that I want to capture from that region. So everything that we make is expressive of the place. Every vineyard that we make in barrel has characteristics that are expressive of that vineyard.
Kind of geeky question, and like you know, I'm a Som, so Som question, and like, feel free, anybody's out there, if you guys want to, like, let me know if I'm going off the deep end here, and if you want either of us to elaborate here. Did you find after you had that time there, because you come to wine from a chemistry background to begin with, right? Mm-hmm. So I always think about like, well, you know, when we talk about grape chemistry, we think about like, okay, pH and, you know, must weight and like just sugars too, really, you know, acid and sugars. Did you find when you came out there, and maybe I'm romanticizing this, you know, because everybody wants to romanticize going to France and Burgundy specifically. Right. When you came back from Burgundy, did you find that you were kind of maybe judging ripeness from a more organoleptic place? Like you were tasting grapes and thinking about ripeness as opposed to relying solely on pH and sugar?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yes. Because even if you're picking at, you know, it doesn't matter what the exact sugar level is when you're picking, it is all about flavor. Yeah. But it's about redefining the type of flavor that you're looking for. So there are people, less today than there were in the past. But I remember learning about winemaking in California, and I heard so many people say, you got to wait for the flavor. You've got to wait for the flavor. Did anybody ever define to me what exactly that flavor was?
What the flavor was. That's somebody's asking that question. So, you know, like, when do you harvest early, ? What month, you know?
Oh, okay.
So do you want to, I mean, like, elaborate? Yeah, August and September.
100% of the time.
Oh, wow.
We're going to start in August or September.
Wow.
So when I was at Freestone, the latest, so out on the far west Sonoma coast, the latest that I ever had a first day of harvest was September 28th. And that was in 2010 or 11, both. We started really late both of those years. Now here inland in the Russian River Valley, where it's warmer, you know, it's a more moderate climate. The latest harvest that I've had, the latest onset to harvest at Gary Farrell has been August 31st.
Oh, wow.
And the earliest was August 9th.
Holy smokes, that's really early.
And let's hope that it stays, let's hope it doesn't get any earlier than that, because I'm not ready to start harvest in July. Let's just be real.
Wow. That's crazy. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So if you think about defining the flavors that you're looking for, I don't believe every winemaker has their own philosophy and flavor palette, right? So I don't believe that jamminess is an expression of terroir. I don't believe that jammy is an expression of site specificity. So I'm looking for, from Pellegrini, I'm looking for fresh Meyer lemon, really rich, concentrated fresh Meyer lemon, and really great acidity, but not too much acidity. So you have to be patient, wait for the acids to decrease as the flavors are increasing in concentration and as the sugar is slowly going up. My goal is to not wait too long. I want to reach that perfect apex where I have exactly the right amount of acidity and exactly the right amount of flavor. So that's the goal. It's hard when you're working with so many different vineyards, but it requires my presence in the vineyards every day. So every morning I'm out there walking and tasting.
And as there's some questions that are rolling in, and like, for the sake of brevity, like, these guys don't have smoke taint issue because they're not going to take anything in that has smoke taint. I mean, that's
correct.
And like, I would say in a lot of ways, like, they're kind of harvesting. This is so mean. A lot of the people that have smoke taint issues are the guys that are like, we're going to make the 17% alcohol wine because the fires tend to be kind of a little bit after harvest or later.
Yeah. Correct.
In a nutshell,
but
yeah.
In 2020 and, you know, with these fire years that we've had, 2020 in particular, any top producer that you're looking at didn't harvest grapes that had been, you know, sitting in prolonged smoke, prolonged smoke exposure.
Yeah.
We started picking 2 days before the fire was reported. And we only brought fruit in for a few days after the fire started because as soon as the smoke settled, the inversion layer in the beginning was such that the smoke was really up above even we weren't really breathing very much smoke at that point. And then a couple days later, the inversion layer changed and the smoke settled into the vineyards and we stopped. That was, you know, that was the end of it for us. So if you waited, you're right. If a winemaker waited for that flavor to develop, then, you know, the longer you have smoke exposure, the more likely you're going to have smoke taint. So we don't have any smoke tainted wines. They're all really fresh and vibrant and delicious. And those producers out there who may accidentally have picked some smoke tainted wines, they're not going to put it in the bottle for you. We learned from 2008 that you just can't do that. So
man, I remember some of those wines, and I don't want to elaborate. And there were a couple relatively larger producers that attempted to capitalize it through marketing wines that were intentionally smoky too.
Right. For the Scotch lovers in the house, right?
Oh man, that was, oh my God. I was on the wholesale side of things then, and I was really glad I didn't have to go out and show any of that kind of stuff. And believe me, I pretty explicitly made fun of people that did.
Hey, you know what? Let's just call that an educational experience.
Yeah. So I really want to allow Theresa to get into like kind of what her approach to Chardonnay is, you know, on the more like delineated aspect. But there's a couple of questions like, do the vineyards you have the access to harvest crews? Do the vineyards you have the access to the harvest crews when you decide that it is time to harvest?
Well, I'm not sure I understand the question.
Like,
I decide when the grapes are ready.
Yeah, ready. And the they're like, if it's not your vineyard, they're like, how does the harvest crew work when you're like, hey, you guys are doing this day? Yeah.
Great question. Every vineyard we work with has either their own crew of grape harvesters, or, you know, a full-time vineyard staff that they work with year round, or they bring in, you know, a temporary vineyard management crew that hires on pickers to come and pick the grapes.
That have a retainer. Yeah,
exactly. And so we make this schedule with the grower. I tell the grower when I'm ready to pick, and within a day or two, he's got my bins ready, loaded up, and they start picking in the middle of the night.
With global warming, are you experimenting with new clones, you or, you know, the other wine vineyards?
Yes, all the time we're experimenting with different vineyards in different locations, different clones that I'm trying out from those different vineyards. But since I'm not the one who owns the vineyard, I'm not able to pull and replant and try different rootstocks and different clones. So for me, it's about experimenting with working with different growers in different regions. But I prefer to use the term climate change because global warming makes it sound like we're just having a warming trend that's never going to stop.
Hmm.
It's called climate change for a reason. And, we're going to see these, fluctuations from earlier ripening years, like we had in 2016, where we had our earliest harvest ever. It started on August 9th. And then we've seen it, get later and later. And the pendulum is going to continue to swing. Granted, it may continue to swing, where things get earlier and earlier for us in terms of harvest. But I hope that, when you have that swing, we'll end up with a year again where it's late and, it's cool climate, perfect growing season like 2018. Does that make sense?
To me, it does. Anybody else
Yeah.
want to? And then, so we've kind of touched base on like, well, what do you want to say about cluster morphology? That's a little note in here too.
Okay, yeah. So really important, actually. Cluster morphology, cluster size, cluster morphology is really important in terms of winemaking and capturing a sense of place. Because if you have a clone like Old Wenty that we work with at Pellegrini, Olivet Lane Vineyard, the clusters are really small, like small like this, and the berries are like the size of my pinky nail. I don't know if you can see that. Whereas clone 4 that we get from our West Side Farms vineyard that's located just down the road from Gary Farrell, the clusters are bigger. They can be bigger, juicier. The berries are more like the size of a thumbnail. And so the smaller clusters have a higher skin to juice ratio. And so you get this natural concentration and depth from the wine. You don't have to let it get super ripe in order to get concentration. Something like clone 4 with bigger, juicier clusters, you can let it get a little bit riper to develop more concentration. And I can treat the bigger, juicier clusters a little bit more aggressively in the press. So when we put the Chardonnay clusters, whole clusters into the press, it's a bladder press that's controlled by compressed air, squeezes the juice out of the grapes. The winemaker can control the amount of tumbles, called rotations. You can control the incremental pressure changes that happen. And the more you do that, the more hands-on you are, the more extraction you're going to get. So I do that more with something like a clone 4 than I would with an Old Wenty. Old Wenty, I use a really gentle champagne pressing program.
Having a super tricked out pneumatic press is not a cheap endeavor.
No, it's really not. Yeah.
So you're also selecting lees, and
Yes.
you want to elaborate on that for people? I talk about that a lot with and how that is and how that's such a defining characteristic of a lot of white wines, and how it differentiates from oak or malolactic, and how a lot of the time sometimes the richer flavors people associate with kind of more medium to fuller bodied white wines is actually from lees contact, and
Yeah.
And as a consumer, kind of finding some of those flavors and understanding how they happen in a wine, I think can be really beneficial. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's really important for us because, as I said, I like to pick at the lower sugar levels in terms of the ripeness spectrum. When you do that, the wines taste more citrusy. In fact, before malolactic fermentation starts, the wine tastes really kind of grapefruity, really citrusy, a little bit more like a Sauvignon Blanc, actually. And so the lees content. So after the clusters are squeezed and the juice comes out of the press, we collect as much of the solids that are floating in the bottom of the tank, the really fluffy stuff. So to be honest, there's a little layer of kind of dirt settled at the bottom of the tank. We don't want that. So when we transfer the juice from one tank to a new receiving tank, we take all the light, fluffy lees that are floating above that kind of dirt layer. We take all of that because we want to add richness and creaminess and density and body to this wine that I was just talking about. That post-alcoholic fermentation can have this really bright citrusy flavor, but it needs more texture. That's where the solids come in. And when you have winemakers like myself who are picking earlier and capturing that bright fruit flavor, you need the lees content to help build the texture. We're stirring during the in-barrel fermentation to help enhance the texture and the richness of the wine. Whereas if you have a winemaker who picks a lot riper, You don't need all the lees and the barrel stirring necessarily to build the concentration because you've already picked really ripe. But I'm not going for that riper profile. So that's why it works so well for us.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's one of the reasons, like out of the gate too, that a lot of you folks notice, like, oh, I like this Chardonnay, you know, because it's not in that super ripe, aggressively ripe style. Somebody's asking if you use the Waukesha pump, and I don't know what they mean by that. Like,
great question. Somebody must have done a harvest. We don't really we use mostly air pumps. We don't really use Waukesha pumps for wine transfers.
Holy smokes. Yeah, because Waukesha is like the community west of here. It's the county west of here. Yeah.
Oh, I wonder if that's why the question. Okay. Yeah, it's an equipment.
100%. 100%. Yeah, I didn't realize that.
No idea that's why it's called that.
Oh, whoa, wild. Oh, crazy. Hey, thanks. Hey, Terry, thanks so much. That's super cool. Yeah, people are raving about the Chardonnay, by the way. Okay, so then a little bit like, and then, you know, I mean, God, we could talk about, I'd like love to talk. I could talk to you just about, well, and like, do you want to say anything about like, you're really doing punch-ins, which are larger barrels, you know, which are like if anybody's like, I'm only a 5'8" guy myself, but a punch-in is 500 liters. It's exponentially larger than like a bourbon barrel, guys. You know what I mean?
Correct.
So, so to
put it in perspective, a regular barrel is 60 gallons.
Yep.
Since we're Americans, punch-in is 132 gallons. So it's a little more than twice the size of a regular barrique.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's like 3 times the volume of when you guys come and see a bourbon barrel in the store. It's literally 3 times the volume of that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Just to give. Yeah, I mean, people kind of understand bourbon barrels around here, and then you're using concrete eggs also. And
we have one concrete egg, and it's fantastic. It's concrete. It's not lined on the inside with any kind of a coating, and so when we ferment in there, we chose it and we use it for Chardonnay fermentation because it's like a big barrel, except it's egg-shaped and it's concrete. So it has thick concrete walls. It's a great insulator. And because it's raw concrete on the inside, you are getting some sort of mineral contribution to the wine, the finished wine, when it's done. We do bottle a little bit under a black label under Gary Farrell that's called the Cuvée d'Œuf. And we produce it every year. The Cuvée d'Œuf is the cuvée of the egg. And it's a delicious, you know, fully concrete fermented Chardonnay. We also put a little bit into the Russian River Selection blend. So you're tasting a little bit in this Chardonnay, actually.
Wow.
Nice stuff. Huh? Thanks.
Oh, man. Loving it.
Yeah, we try really hard to really focus on each of the vineyards so that this wine can be great.
So now I'm on, you know, the 2018 Russian River Valley Selection Chardonnay. If you want to, you know, dial into... Yeah, you know, that in and of itself, man, wow.
Sure.
Yeah, I want folks to know. Sorry. I always want, because, you know, the sales part of this, one aspect of it is like, they made less than 6,000 cases of this wine. Like, which is just, I mean, something that I would think one of the more just to give you some kind of perspective, like, something that's ultimately a Sonoma County, like, super popular thing would be like, Duckhorn Decoy Chardonnay, and there's going to be probably 100,000 or more cases of something like that made. You know what I mean? Right. Like the scale that you guys are doing this at is much. It is boutique. Yeah,
it's still boutique, and you know, 6,000 cases is the most that we've ever made of our Russian River Selection Chardonnay. 10,000 is the most we've ever made of the Pinot. So it's really, the focus is on the quality of each of the vineyards. I can't elaborate on that enough, which is why I keep talking about it. So this Chardonnay is a modest 13.3% alcohol because I'm picking at those lower sugars, right? It's aged for about 9 months and 35% new French oak. Most of those barrels, 95% of those barrels are light toast French oak barrels. I keep talking about these vineyards and capturing site specificity. I don't want to use medium plus, or heavy toast, or even toasted heads, because that's just going to mask all of this purity and freshness that I'm looking for.
Yeah, and I want to
Compare-
just
Go
talk
ahead,
about
Nate.
that, just in the sense that, like, when she talks about toasting a barrel, what happens is, like, the higher you toast the barrel, the more you're caramelizing sugars in the barrel and exposing the wine itself to those, and the more we get, those flavors become really, really explicit. So a lot of times people come, I think a trend with consumers nowadays is, like, we say, oh, I don't like oaky Chardonnay, or, like, I want an unoaked Chardonnay. And I kind of, like, I'm always like, let's not go down this binary road about oak. Meaning, like,
Lightly.
yeah, exactly. It's like I get it, because human nature is like, let's make, hey, this shit's good and this shit's bad. You know what I mean? And, like, just throw your concept of oak away. That, like, it's with white wines, like, there tends to be, like, we get this modicum of knowledge about white wine, and we then associate, like, all oak is bad, and, like, only thing I can ever have is an unoaked white wine. And it's like, dude, it's like cooking, man. Like if you
It
don't
is.
put a little bit of salt in that
It's a
shit, it's
seasoning.
not gonna taste like anything.
Yeah.
And I think that's all the world's greatest Chardonnays have a little bit of oak, even if it's an old ass fucking barrel that barely tastes like anything.
Yeah.
I'm
Some
gonna
of
go out
them
on that
have
limb.
100% new oak.
Yeah.
Some, Burgundy
Yeah.
and Chardonnays are
Yeah.
100% new oak. It's mind blowing to me. So, okay. So when you talk about styles of Chardonnay, I was talking about the riper style. So if we're talking about a wine that was picked at, say, 25, 26 bricks, that's like 15% alcohol.
Mhm.
You're already getting that concentration and that golden fruit quality. You're getting more tropical and golden apple and pear, roasted Meyer lemon, because the fruit got riper on the vine. If you put that through malolactic fermentation, you're going to develop more buttery qualities, because your baseline of flavors is already riper and more tropical, and it's going to develop more buttery flavors. Throw that in a new oak barrel with medium or heavy toast, and you're really just accentuating all of that with the caramelly vanilla flavors, and really just wrapping the already existing buttery, ripe, tropical qualities in something that's even sweeter and creamier. So that's where I think that's where the buttery flavors come from. But if you start with something that's less ripe and really crisp and citrusy, fresh lemon or fresh Meyer lemon instead of roasted, your baseline is fresh. You put your wines through malolactic fermentation, which we do, you're not going to develop that buttery flavor. You're just developing creaminess, enhanced richness and creaminess. And, I use light toast barrels because I want to accentuate, polish up everything that I've captured in the fruit itself.
Here's this is kind of a geeky question. Sorry.
That's okay.
Folks, if you out there just don't, whatever, if this goes off the deep end, because this is kind of a weird one, and it's for my own edification here. So do you find that, is there a certain, like, pH level that diacetyl tends to express itself aromatically?
I think it's more about the ripeness of the fruit.
Okay.
Yes, there is. I think that above pH 3.4 or 3.5 is where you're going to start to develop more of that. But usually that coincides with riper fruit.
Because here's the thing. I think a lot of you guys out there, like when people come in and they're like, I don't like oaky Chardonnay, I think a lot of times what it is they don't like malolactic or diacetyl, and they think, like, the buttery they don't like the buttery popcorn thing, and they end up associating that with oak. And from when I do a broader Chardonnay only, like, wine class, I take, like, we try 8 different Chardonnays, and I kind of go through all the iterations, and, like, at least 3 out of 4 people, what they end up really not liking is what they think is oak is actually the super creamy, like, mallow thing that has also is lacking acidity at the same time.
Yeah.
And that's interesting. And I just want to have that conversation because, oh my God, like, this is what you think about all day, every day,
Every day.
Yeah. Every day.
But you can have a riper, to your point about acidity, you can have a riper wine that doesn't develop all that diacetyl quality. So,
really? And then what? So what are you curious? Because I'm curious. Like, why does diacetyl? I mean, what are the thresholds for it? Because I find like as soon as I look at Chardonnay and it's like, oh, this is 14.5% alcohol, and then it seems like the mallow is like way more, or way more prevalent on it. What do you
The
think?
threshold of diacetyl when it goes from not buttery to really buttery, you mean?
Yeah. Is there a certain is there a curve that it happens at? Because you're obviously avoiding that. You're like, I don't want
and
my.
so I don't have experience in working with the scale. If I had, like, I love to calibrate my palate using experimentation and make a whole bunch of different wines and have that curve, that palate curve, but I don't have it.
But obviously you're using native yeast sometimes and doing barrel fermentation with native yeast, and then adding those into like this blend, which that in and of itself is like, nobody realizes like how crazy and like you would have hundreds of different fermentations going on at the same time, potentially.
Easily.
Yeah.
Easily.
Yeah,
every
it's
year.
great. Yeah, every year, like hundreds upon hundreds. It's not
and
like
we're managing individual barrel fermentations and individual tanks, Pinot Noir and Zinfandel.
Yeah, so great, so wild. Okay, this is, I don't know. If you have time when we go to the end of this, I'll go back to this idea because I really love the Chardonnay too. So I don't know, whatever you want to go with the rest of it. I apologize for monopolizing too much. Yeah,
I love the focus on Chardonnay because right when we opened this conversation up, I told you how I had fallen in love with Chardonnay.
Yeah.
I do love it. I love making both Pinot Noir and Chardonnay, but Chardonnay was a newer love of mine.
Oh man!
So moving on to Pinot, are you on the oak tank slide, the Pinot?
Yes.
Slide?
Yep.
Cool. So that's an oak tank. You can see some barrels down below. This oak tank I purchased in 2012 when I first started at Gary Farrell, and getting back to Gary Farrell. My harvest in Burgundy. I actually worked in a cellar at Domaine de Monti that had exclusively oak tanks, ranging from 3 to 15, 18 tons. I don't remember how big, but I loved them. They're all punched down by hand, and you have to throw a plank across the top of the tank. The person stands on the tank, and you use a giant plunger. Usually they're made out of metal, but you use a giant plunger to push down the cap and to mix during fermentation. So when I came back, I bought a bunch of oak tanks at Freestone, and then basically even before I started at Gary Farrell, I emailed Nancy, our general manager, and told her that I was wanting to purchase an oak tank for Gary Farrell. So we did. We only have space for one, but it's wonderful. I like to use it for whole cluster fermentations. So I've done anything from 40 to 100% whole cluster in that tank.
Oh wow!
Cool stuff.
Yeah.
And the 100% whole cluster that I did from Hallberg, you can't even tell that it's 100% whole cluster. It's just a gorgeous wine. So
this is a really cool thing too. And for folks that have done like this you can't, let me just put this away. Once you super scale up with Pinot Noir, you're not doing this. Like Theresa's intentionally leaving the stems on some of the grape varieties to give them a breadth of flavor that comes from something besides the oak and the skins and the juice.
Correct.
It's essentially.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. I think this is, and this one way I like to always talk to consumers about this too, or when we get, especially, or when we try wines from Burgundy, or we try Syrah that has whole cluster. There was a time when this was the only way human beings knew how to make wine.
Right.
Right?
Like I love Lucy style. You walk on it, right? We walk on the grapes. We of course are wearing rubber boots or hosed off sanitized feet. But I hate to turn people off that way, but we only it's natural winemaking. It's small lot, micro winemaking when you think about it that way.
What percentage of whole cluster are you kind of dealing with nowadays on the Pinot Noir?
It's fermentation by fermentation, but the range is anywhere from 0 to 100%. Mm-hmm. And, in most years, I'm using 30 to 50% whole cluster across the board in the cooler climate vineyards. So the western flank of the Russian River Valley and anything west of that, even if it's outside the Russian River Valley. And then, the eastern vineyards and the northern warmer vineyards that I was pointing out on the map, those I max it out at, 15 to 30%. And that's because in warmer climates, the fruit ripens a little ahead of the stems. And I don't find that I get the lignification of the stems, the hardening off of the stems, where they turn from something that's green and herbaceous to something that's hard and brown and lignified.
Wow.
And tastes like tea. It tastes like black tea when you bite into a ripe stem. If you bite into an underripe stem, it's green and juicy. It tastes like asparagus. We don't want that in large percentages. I've done, even experimenting, I've done 100% whole cluster with super neon green stems, and it's still beautiful, but boy, is it stemmy.
Wow.
So, you know, it's all about experimenting and finding out what works best with different vineyards. And so that's what I've found to be the case.
Yeah, and it's interesting, like and this is me, right? And like I'm somebody who's privileged enough to get to do blind tasting and think about blind tasting and show people how to do blind tasting. And this wine to me the Pinot Noir has a stem component to it. It has a whole cluster component to it. And for me, I get out of it. And I'm having the 2017. I'll note that folks at home, you might have 2017, you might have 2018 Pinot Noir.
Right.
Just know if you purchase any of the wine tonight beyond what you've got, you know, you will get 2018 is what you will receive, okay? But I'm drinking the 2017 Pinot Noir, and I get the whole cluster thing, and I mean this in the absolute, like, in a positive term. To me, like, whole cluster Pinot Noir I get aromatic qualities that remind me a little bit of bay leaf. They'll remind me a little bit of fennel. They're like sweet and savory herbs. It's never a green. If somebody's doing it right, it's never like a green or stemmy quality. It's this spicy, savory herb thing that's neither derived from the oak or from the fruit. And I love it. It makes me like, it's one of my favorite things about Pinot Noir when done right. And I totally get this in this, and I'm having I'm having a great moment. Yeah. Yeah.
That's hilarious.
Yeah.
Are you a stem head?
I am a stem head. Totally. And like, I'll seek out, especially like cool climate Syrah that's 100% is like the thing I'm the most excited about in the world. Yeah. Yeah.
I love whole cluster Syrah.
Mm-hmm. Oh,
so anyway, not to breeze too quickly over it, but you know, with the winemaking for Pinot, again, trying to capture a sense of place is really important. So picking early, doing a quick 3 to 5 day cold soak, just to have a soaking period during the aqueous phase when it's just water components. It's sugar, grape material and water from the grapes themselves. And so getting the aqueous flavors and color and aromas out of the grapes is really important, because that's your baseline of what you're going to start with when you initiate the fermentation. So then we inoculate for fermentation. Fermentation lasts, for Pinot Noir, it's really quick. Cabernet lasts a lot longer than that. But for Pinot Noir, fermentation is anywhere from 3 to 5 days. After the alcoholic fermentation is finished, I like to leave everything steeping in the tank for another, even longer than what says on the slide, anywhere from 7 to 14 days, depending on the vineyard, depending on how the wine tastes. During that period, you're developing flavors. After fermentation's finished, it tastes really grapey and primary. And so I want to leave it longer so that it can develop more complex aromas and flavors. And you get a kind of a softening effect of the tannins, because I'm a chemist, right? So immediately after fermentation's finished, you have these sort of aggressive short chain tannins. During the extended maceration, they elongate and they soften on the palate. So we do a little bit of Saignée only in bigger vintages. That means we're bleeding off some juice immediately after we put the grapes into tank, so that you're not draining off all that color that I would have developed during the cold soak. Instead, we drain the juice off in the first day, within the first 24 hours. And with the oak, I'm using light toast barrels, like I told you with the Chardonnay, because they really help to accentuate all of the site specificity, all that purity of flavor that I'm looking for. The light toast barrel helps to support and accentuate all of that. Polishing.
Guys, Theresa is a French oak only girl too.
Yes.
Yeah.
And not because we're snobby, not because we're snobby at all. French oak trees have a tighter grain of wood.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
Yep.
Wow.
American oak trees have more airspace, Therefore, the wine, can penetrate into the wood more, and you would end up getting more of the wood or toast flavors. So that's why French oak is complementary to the style of wines that we are producing at Gary Farrell. We're looking for purity and sense of place. French oak works well because we don't want to extract too much of the wood and toast flavors.
And these aren't Theresa's words; they're mine. It takes a real barbarian to put Pinot Noir in American oak, guys. I just, yeah.
Well,
That's me. Yeah. But
the riper styles of Pinot work well in American oak barrels, but
fair.
What's really great in American oak is Syrah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's not Wisconsin oak, guys. Yeah. And most of the American oak is like Missouri, and some is Minnesota. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm on the same. I'm in the same universe with you on the Syrah front. Fair, very fair. No, not swamp oak, not bur oak. It's all white oak, guys. Yeah, it's
white oak.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Quercus elba.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly. Exactly.
All right. Yep.
So are you on the Pinot slide?
Yes, I'm on. Now I'm on the. No, I'm going to go to that because we did the Pinot winemaking slide. And then we're on the Pinot slide. Yep.
Yeah, the 1718 Russian River Selection Pinot.
Yep.
So am I allowed to tell you what I told you before we got on the Zoom about what I think about these two Russian River Selection wines that we're drinking today? Do you remember what I said?
Absolutely. Please go ahead.
My opinion of these wines, and I'm the winemaker, I'm not a salesperson. These two wines, in my opinion, are stupid delicious because they're so affordable and approachable. And you with the Pinot, you just have this really juicy, succulent, vibrant cherry that's up front, but you have the whole cluster characteristics that add layers of complexity and depth. They're very user-friendly. This Russian River Pinot is very user-friendly, both vintages. And it has a little bit of the pinosity is a term that I like to use, which just means, kind of a little bit of that gamey Pinot quality that's just native to the varietal, but it's not in an abundance. You're getting more of the voluptuous fruit than you are of the gaminess. The earthiness comes from the inclusion of whole clusters and the fact that I pick on the earlier end of the ripeness scale. So it has this bright red color to it. It's got great acidity that pairs beautifully, even with Asian cuisine. I have done pairings with Vietnamese food. We did a wine dinner with a Chinese restaurant in Miami, and she just really pulled out all kinds of really cool pairings with this wine and with the Chardonnay as well.
Yeah, it's weird. Like as far as flavors go, like there's like a hyssop character almost to the Pinot too. That is like that kind of like ripe fennel-y thing that, oh my god, wow, nice. Wow, very cool.
So yeah, 10,000, about between 10 and 11,000 cases of the Russian River Pinot is what we produced from either of the two vintages. Oh, you got the case counts there. Look at that.
Yeah, Nancy hooked it up.
I don't want to forget to talk about this. We recently switched to DM cork, which is it's an agglomerated cork material where they've intentionally removed any cork taint compound. TCA, trichloroanisole, has been removed from the cork material, and then they put the ground up cork back together using a binding material to make a cork that is 100% guaranteed to be TCA free. So when you pull a cork on one of these wines, you can rest assured that no matter when you open it, it's not going to be corked. How's that for awesomeness? I just got tired of having corked wines. I got tired. We put so much energy, blood, sweat, and tears into making these great wines. I got tired of pulling a cork and having it be messed up.
Yeah, it's my analogy is always like what? Imagine if you made a product. Imagine if you made a computer and like you couldn't use it because it was in a bad box.
Right. That's a great analogy.
Yeah. I mean, like I'm always like, imagine if you made something and like somewhere between 1% and 4% of it was spoiled because of the package, but nobody realized it was the package that fucked it up. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like that's the other part. It's like once sometimes like if we have a corked wine in like a class or something here, I always get as many like employees here to come learn what corked wine smells like. I'm like, it's
Yeah.
like if it's like wet dog, like old books or like a
Yeah.
like wet cardboard, that's corked wine, guys. Like
A
I
badly corked wine reminds me of stepping into an old musty boat, like an old wooden
yeah,
musty boat.
totally, totally. I mean, and that's funny, and like I don't know, whatever. I'll probably go offline and try to have a TCA conversation with you, but it's like,
Yeah.
yeah. Oh, so some questions though. Awesome science on the corking. Thank you. That's what people are saying. These are food friendly wines like Burgundies. They
Yes.
are.
Yes,
That's
they are.
what. That's what. That's probably the ultimate compliment that you could give
It
Theresa,
is.
guys. Yeah. I
Thank you.
mean,
Thank you.
yeah.
For giving that compliment.
Yeah. And oh, can these be aged? How long?
For sure. So
Yeah.
let's see. I have opened older Gary Farrell wines. I had a 1988 Gary Farrell Russian River Selection Pinot that a former coworker of mine opened up when we were in Italy. So I went to go. He used to work at Gary Farrell. He was a temporary somm. He came here for educational purposes. He's from the Piedmont region of Italy.
Oh wow.
So we went to go visit him in 2018. And when I was there, he was like, Theresa, I want to have a blind tasting with you. And so he pulled the cork on this wine and had me guess. He wanted me to go through the whole, like somm, deduction scenario. And I'm not a trained somm, I'm a winemaker. So I went through my own process and I deduced that it was Pinot Noir, but I didn't know where it was from. And it turns out it was a 1988 Gary Farrell Pinot. I thought maybe it was a wine from, the 90s or the 2000s, but it was still very fresh and alive. And our 2012 Pinots that I've opened recently, 12 and 13, they're still really fresh and vibrant and alive. And if they're not, it means it probably had a bad cork, which is why we switched to DM.
So you feel confident like a decade on the Pinot Noir?
Easy.
Yeah, easy.
Yeah, I would say that they start to. Our wines are they don't really show their best until they've been in bottle for a few years. So the 18s are just right. They're starting to show everything that I wanted to show when I made the wines, right? But they're just starting to show. Give them another, 3, 4, 5 years, and they'll really start to develop everything that we want them to show. And then all of that can hang on for a decade easily, probably longer than that.
Yeah, and you're, more and more, I'm having people start to realize like how quality Chardonnay is really a thing to cellar, and even at this price point, I feel like like 3 to 5 years easily for the Chardonnay too. Easily.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and in a lot of ways the same thing. The same thing. Like man, wow. Yeah, I'm kind of blown away by the Chardonnay actually. Like really.
Our wines, our wines are meant to age. We produce them so that they can age well.
Yeah. Anything, I don't want to like any other thing you want to kind of hit on with the Pinot. It's many of the same vineyard sources.
Yeah, so we produce there are more actually. There are, between 20 and 25, 26 sometimes different vineyards in the Russian River Selection Pinot. And so we like to talk about the two appellation blends that we're talking about today. I like to talk about them as the orchestra or the symphony, right? And then each of the single vineyard designates that we produce are like the soloists. And so what makes this Pinot Noir so special is that it has little snippets of the warmer climate in the Russian River Valley, all the way out to the cooler part of the Russian River Valley, and even west. There's a little bit of Fort Ross in there. There's a little bit of Gap's Crown from the Petaluma Wind Gap, even a little tiny bit of Pinot from Santa Rita Hills from the central coast of California. So it's just a beautiful painting of the Russian River Valley as a whole. That's the way that I like to see it.
Man, I'm getting like lots of folks are really happy about these wines.
Yay.
Yeah, man. Only a few of you have my personal text message and like, I love you, but like, come on now, man. I'm trying to do this live. You like, this is like, this is a weird meta thing when like customers are texting me while we're doing this, and I'm trying to answer the chat and tell you what people are saying. It's like, But yeah,
That's pretty
this is
funny.
it's really silly. So cool. Wow, super delicious. Yeah.
So in some ways, I'm looking at the redefining Sonoma style slide. In some ways,
Yep.
we are, over the past couple of decades, we have been trying to redefine the style that comes from Sonoma County, which is to make wines that are site specific and, have a distinct minerality, that are really balanced and rich, but not overripe. That's the goal, right?
Yeah.
That's really the ultimate goal. And I think a lot of producers are making wines this way. I think it's the new Sonoma County.
I find too, and this is a global. I'm a 42-year-old guy out here, and like, I just think about my own journey of food and becoming a certified sommelier and the whole nine yards, and I think in a lot of ways American culture is like we're in our like third decade really about our third decade in of really having redefining our cuisine and our approach to food and beverage in a harmonious way. And it's I think about this in a way like I started selling wine in the 1990s, and I do look at how wineries such as your own have matured, and we're always doing, a lot of people were always doing this style, but it's only now becoming appreciated deep down into the average consumer level and not just the collector level, in a way that we now apply it and think about like, I have to make these wines so they're delicious on their own, and I can have them on at the table too.
Yeah, you can have them on the table and you can lay them down for years and age them. That's another key. We're making wines that are more age-worthy now.
This is kind of a segue from Terry here. Would it be possible to grow a reasonably good Pinot on a sunny, dry southwest slope in Marin? And there is wine grown in Marin, but Marin is like the real estate's pretty expensive.
Yeah, it sure is. It sure is. But yeah, to answer your question,
yeah, completely.
A different style from that kind of perspective, but there's some great Pinot vineyards coming from Marin County. Dutton Goldfield makes a couple of wines from that area, and they're really nice. Devil's Pinot.
Yeah, and oh man, I think there was even at one point a pretty cool. We're getting a little off topic, but I think Hartford Court did a Marin AVA.
Okay.
Why? Yeah. Okay. But yeah, that answers your question, Terry. I think we touched all the bases on this. We're getting deep.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
So I've gone on to the next one, and I'm not going to talk a huge amount of critics appreciating our style. The critics have been digging our wines. We've had some, like number one in the Wine Enthusiast in 2017, and we had some other accolades from critics who've put us as top wineries of the year and that kind of thing. And I love it. I think it's fantastic. And the fact that the Wine Enthusiast chose our Russian River Selection Chardonnay as the number one wine of the year in 2017 was pretty spectacular.
Yeah.
Because it's a wine that really gets out there into the hands of the people who are with us today.
Theresa, being winery of the year with the Pinot Report.
Yeah.
Like that's
Yeah.
That's like Steve Jobs telling you're the best programmer. It's like it's pretty. That's a really cool accolade. Like kudos to you.
I'm sad that Greg is not with us anymore.
Yeah.
That was really tragic. But we were the last winery that he gave that accolade to before he passed.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Jeez.
That's pretty special.
Whew. Man, this was so great to have you. Thank you so much. I know. I feel we're going on the sustainability slide. If you guys really make a pretty massive effort not to be, there's some people in Northern California, the Wagner family, that have really done some pretty horrible things for like waterways and stuff, and you guys are doing exactly the opposite of that. So,
Yeah.
yep.
Yeah.
If you want to elaborate on that.
Sonoma County made it a #1 goal to become, the first sustainable wine growing region in California, and we've succeeded in doing so. And so most of our growers are, have either already become certified sustainable, or are a small handful of them are in the process of becoming certified. And it's great because, we want to protect the earth. The winery is also now certified sustainable. You can see this huge array of solar panels on the roof, and we're defraying 93% of our annual power usage by having installed those in early 2020. So pretty amazing.
Man, so cool. Wow.
Yeah. And also, I've just moved on to the diversity and inclusion slide. We are now becoming involved as much as possible in diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I'm, the leader in that. I'm on the new committee for Sonoma County Vintners. We have a new committee for diversity and inclusion. And what we're doing is just trying to bring diversity to Sonoma County, and trying to help people, trying to present tools to other, organizations and companies in Sonoma County to help them feel comfortable about bringing diversity into their own organizations. So we're learning together. I'm learning. We're learning together. So I would love it if everybody could, everybody all at once, come and visit Gary Farrell once we're all, wide open again.
Hey, I love the socks, by the way.
Oh, thanks. Those are shoes.
Oh, really? Are they? Oh, I see it now.
Yeah, those are shoes.
Wow. Oh, I see it. Oh, those are good. Those are good heels, girl.
So,
those are good heels.
Let me tell you that that's the most expensive pair of shoes. I'm not one of those people who spends a whole lot of money on shoes and clothing and stuff. So those are the most expensive Italian leather shoes that I've ever purchased. And, they came in their own little box with their own little bag and everything, which they're sitting in right now. They're Italian leather suede. They're fantastic.
Oh, amazing.
The rainbow. The rainbow.
I know. I'm sorry I even thought they were socks. What kind of what kind of total rube am I? The Wisconsin guy said by Italian leather. Yeah. Gorgeous though. Hey, so I'm gonna open it up though, if you're ready for other, just questions. Is there anything you guys want to address Theresa about? I'll give you. Why don't we say I'll give it till 6:40 our time, and then we'll cut it off. Because as soon as you guys ask, I'll ask your. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Carol's saying she was there in 2006 and she's gonna go back in 2022.
Oh, yeah, great. Yep. Let me know, please. Put her in touch with me and.
Yeah, Carol, feel free to reach out to me and I'll give you Theresa's contact info. I'll put my, I'll put my email address here.
That'd be great. We'd love to set up a special tasting for anybody who comes to us through this kind of an event. We welcome everybody. So here's something that's really important too. Not only are we hosting people in person, currently only outdoors, but eventually we're going to get it back into indoor tastings, but we're going to continue with the virtual events where we have either myself with one of our estate sommeliers or, another staff from the winery hosting these virtual tastings with customers who want to participate. And they're very engaging, small interactions with somebody from Gary Farrell.
Theresa, what municipality is the tasting room in Sonoma?
We're in the town of Healdsburg.
Yeah, they're in Healdsburg. That was the question. Oh yeah, are you guys? Oh wow, okay. And then there's the winery. Okay, got it. You're not in the square or anything. Okay.
In fact, we're about 15, 20 minutes outside of the town of Healdsburg.
Okay.
We're in between Healdsburg and Guerneville.
Okay.
But our zip code, our postal code is Healdsburg.
Same as Healdsburg. Okay. Yeah. Oh, hey, so just so I can, while these roll in too, I haven't gotten enough one. Like the diacetyl thing is really fascinating to me because I don't pick it up at all in the Chardonnay, but it's obvious that you have mallow, but it's
Yes,
like
100%.
yeah, like I think of it as like there's like three spheres going on with Chardonnay. You know what I mean? There's like acid, there's like acid, oak, and mallow, and how they interact is like really, 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 really complicated in a lot of ways,
It's science.
It's totally science, yeah. And then also, do you feel, this is a super geeky question, so when you go and work in, in Beaune, or the Côte de Beaune, or the Côte d'Or in Burgundy, and specifically it's Montil, but they're in Montilly, and they make both red and white wines, but everything is Cellar Selection there.
Correct. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
I understand your point, right? They're not necessarily working with clones and blocks of clones the way we are in America, right? They have so Domaine de Monty is located in the winery itself. The original domain is located in Volnay.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, it makes Volnay.
Where the winemaking facility that they have now is in Meursault, which is where I worked in 2006 when I did a harvest. But yeah, so the most important point, getting back to site specificity in Burgundy, is that Domaine de Monty is in Volnay. It's right next door to Pommard, right? And so these vineyards are, the biggest name on a bottle of Burgundy is the name of the vineyard. And what's fascinating to me is that Volnay and Pommard are right next door. You could throw a stone from one to the other, and they're so different.
Yeah.
Volnay is rich and supple and a little bit more red fruit driven, and Pommard is Pommard. It's earthy, it's dark, it's deep. And they're right next door to each other, but they're not planted to clonal selections. They're, as you say, selection massal. It's Volnay, or Le Taipier, which is the vineyard within Volnay.
Like people, and to get you guys out there, like, because these are places, some of them have been vineyards for 900 years.
Right.
Or longer.
They have a little bit more experience than we do.
They just take, instead of buying fruit from a nursery, they just replant it with their own cuttings and have for hundreds of years. So the vineyard is really its own, like, it's its own closed system in a really, like, they figured out, hey, the fruit from this vine works the best here. I'll take a cutting from this and just replant it to that. And over and over again, they're doing that. Where we're still, a lot of ways, we're in the experimental phase in a place like the Russian River Valley to figure out what clones of Pinot Noir work in what sites. Let me ask these questions for other people. How have the periodic floods affected your vineyards and or operations?
Oh, the flooding actually is, not super critical in terms of grape growing. We're in the Russian River Valley, and so most of the vineyards are accustomed to being flooded here and there. So the flooding happens in the winter. Generally, between December and February is when the worst of the flooding has happened. And yeah, the flooding over the last couple of years has damaged facilities and caused issues with, like the Barlow facility in Sebastopol. Some of those places flooded, but in terms of vineyards, the vines are dormant, and so it just really soaks the soil. And if we had enough water in the soil during a flood year, that means that we're going to have more water in the soil throughout the grape growing season, which can be a good thing. Drought years are worse.
Yeah, that's more of a concern that kind of goes. The concept of drought and floods are overlapping within the idea of referring to of climate change as opposed to global warming,
Correct.
Yeah. And I'm not a scientist, but Theresa is. So there you go. There you go.
Hey, you're a some scientist.
Yeah. But Kathy Barry's asking, do you add the grapes from different she's feeling a little guilty, like this is a novice question. But
Yeah.
do you add grapes from the different regions from the very start, or are those different grape locations soaked, etc., and then you as the winemaker blend them? And we
Yes,
talked about this
that's
a
it.
little bit. Yeah, it's
We did. Mhm.
go ahead. It's more the
So
latter.
everything is, yeah,
Oh,
all the different regions, all the different vineyards that you see on the map, we pick everything separately, even blocks within the vineyards.
yeah.
They're picked separately, fermented and aged in barrel separately. And then it's not until, for the red wines, it's not until the month of May or June that we blend components together physically in the cellar. Prior to that, starting in the spring months, we're tasting and doing lab trials to decide
Mhm.
on blends, but then it's May, June that we put the blends together in the cellar, and everything, becomes a giant blend.
Yeah, and I want to like because you're somebody that works with both cultured yeast and native yeast, and you've
Mm-hmm.
got to keep those fermentations separate, and like that's its own just does that like I always to me like a I mean I've never done winemaking because 15 years ago I worked a distemmer in Livermore and got like 94 wasp stings on the same day and was like
Oh
I'm good.
no.
Yeah, not 94, but it was over 2 dozen, and I was like, I'm good. I can just talk about this stuff. Um,
Funny.
but I always think about like, I mean, like yeast is just holy shit, right? It's like so baffling. As a chemist, you've got to just
Yeah,
be in awe of it, aren't you?
I am.
Oh my
And
god.
there's so many yeast strains that I could trial, but I stick to my favorites. So I use for Pinot, I have my two or three favorite yeast strains, and same for Chardonnay. I use mostly Montrachet for the Chardonnays because I find it to be a complete fermenter. And I like the flavor profile. It doesn't get too hot. It's not too cool of a fermenter. It's efficient, and it doesn't make a buttery wine. So, and then with Pinot, I'm using RC212 and BRG, capital BRG. Both are Burgundian isolates, and they do a really good job of fermenting. And I also like Aspenhausen, which is a German yeast strain for Pinot Noir. That's a really cool fermenter. It starts off really cool, so it helps to capture aromas. But it's a slow fermenter, so I can't use it until the very end when I know that I'm not going to need to flip a tank.
And for the real geeks out there, Aspenhausen refers to a village in the Rheingau that's
Yep.
noted for making Pinot Noir as opposed to Riesling.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or if you're a Seinfeld watcher, you can think about Kramer in the Ass Man episode.
Hey, I didn't say it, guys. I did the F bombs, but it was her. There you go. Yeah.
Oh, I love that show.
Oh man, me too. I'm a huge fan. Hey,
Mhm.
thank you so much. This was so cool. I'll remind everybody again, like on Ray's website, the Chardonnay is on sale for $29.99. The Pinot Noir is
Great friend.
$36.99. Um, I'll have these wines ready to pick up on April 28th or later. So you can put your pickup date in as the 28th or later. Um, Man, Theresa, this was so amazing. If you folks, go out to Sonoma, feel free to reach out to myself and or, the winery personally. I think this is really there's a lot of stuff like that Theresa gets to do really small productions of that are just really through the winery. Like what's your range in single vineyard production wise from one, like small
Cases?
yeah, cases.
Yeah. So we make anywhere from 50 cases up to,
2 barrels.
1,000 cases of vineyard
Yeah.
designates
Yeah.
for the single vineyard designates. That's the range.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. We usually end this at like 6:30, so I've gone like way
A
over.
little over, yeah.
Yeah. Like in
Cool.
conclusion, this was so awesome. You're getting like a million accolades.
Awesome.
Wow. The next time I'm out there, I'll make my way there. Yeah, like my wife
Don't
is
forget to check out our YouTube channel to look at those grower videos, and
yeah.
check out the website and look at the virtual tastings that we're offering at just www.garyfarrellwinery.com. We've
Wow.
got lots of stuff to offer in addition to what we did today.
Yeah, awesome. Hey, thanks so much, Theresa. I'll follow up
Thank
with you
you.
too. This was super,
Okay.
super cool. Like, man, this
Hope to
is,
see some of you at Gary Farrell and you too.
oh my God, this is making me really want to go to like Healdsburg and Armstrong State Park and the coast and
Yes,
everything. I'm
when it
getting,
reopens.
okay, bye. Thanks,
Bye. Thank
everybody.
you.